Hello everyone and welcome to Chapter 2 in our management course. And this week we'll be discussing Chapter 2, which is management theory. And this will be the kind of the essential background for being a successful manager. In this chapter will just give a short overview of the three principal historical perspectives or viewpoints on management, which are called classical, behavioral, and quantitative. And where the classical viewpoint emphasizes on ways to manage more efficiently. We talked about the efficiency need in Chapter 1. We'll be talking about behavioral viewpoint, which is emphasis on importance of understanding human behavior and motivating and encouraging employees towards achievement. Then that last viewpoint is called the quantitative viewpoint, which applies quantitative techniques to management. Next in our chapter, we will be describing the three principal contemporary viewpoints, which are systems, contingency, and quality management, with the systems viewpoint regarding the organization as systems of interrelated parts that operate together to achieve a common purpose. The contingency viewpoint emphasizes that a manager's approach should vary according to the individual and the environmental situation. Lastly, the quality management viewpoint is concerned with quality, or the total ability of a product or service to meet all of our customers' needs. And that has three aspects that we'll talk about: quality control, quality assurance, and TQM, or total quality management. Then we will conclude our chapter, which we will be considering the concept of learning organizations. And a learning organization is one that actively creates, acquires, and transfers knowledge within itself and is able to modify its behavior to reflect new knowledges. Now, as always, as we go through the chapter, going through each of the 8 sections of this chapter, we will have major questions for you to be able to think back to and see if you can answer those questions after you've read through the chapter. And here are those first 4 questions as we go through the chapter, and those last 4 questions to essentially roll up and conclude our chapter. Now that we kind of know what to look for in a chapter, let's go ahead and jump into our first part of the chapter here. Okay, as we look into the first part, or 2.1 of our Chapter 2, it introduces Peter Drucker, who was kind of a creator, inventor of modern management. He published The Practice of Management way back in 1954, proposing that management should be a profession. He introduced several ideas in that kind of underlie the practice of management, such as workers should be treated as assets, a corporation is a human community, and that there is no business without a customer. Now, while Drucker didn't invent evidence-based management, it's very much in the spirit of his rational approach to management. And we define evidence-based management as translating principles based on best evidence into organizational practice, bringing rationality to the decision-making process. Now, 2 principal proponents from that are Stanford business scholars that were in the chapter were Jeffrey Pfeffer and Robert Sutton, who wrote Facing the Hard Facts About What Works and What Doesn't Work, Understanding the Dangerous Half-Truths That Constitute So Much Conventional Wisdom About Management, and Rejecting the Total Nonsense That Too Often Passes for Sound Advice, will help organizations perform better. Therefore, that learning to make managerial decisions based on the evidence is the approach we hope you will learn, rather than taking bits and pieces that may not be sound advice. Therefore, we want to make sure we take the hard evidence when we are making our managerial decisions. Now, as I talked about earlier, in this chapter, in Chapter 2, we will just be describing 2 overarching perspectives about overall management. The historical, which the historical perspective includes 3 viewpoints: the classical, the behavioral, and the quantitative. And then we also talk about the contemporary perspective, which includes 3 viewpoints: the systems, contingency, and quality management. Now you might be asking yourselves, is there a reason for studying about these theoretical perspectives? Well, there are 5 good reasons for studying our theoretical perspectives. The first one is understanding of the present. Should theories help us interpret the present to understand what is happening and why? Understanding history will give you or will help you understand why some practices are still favored, whether for right or wrong reasons. Our second reason that for studying our theoretical perspectives is guide to action. Good theories help you make predictions and enable you to develop a set of principles that will guide your actions in business. The third reason is a source of new ideas. They can also provide new ideas that may be useful to you when you come up against new situations in business as a manager. Our fourth reason for studying our theoretical perspectives is clues to meaning of your managerial decisions. They can help you understand your firm's focus, where the top managers are coming from, essentially, as they are performing those roles that we described in Chapter 1. Alright, they've got this goal for the business. Well, where's that information coming from? Why are they thinking that way? And our fifth reason for studying theoretical perspective is clues to meaning of outside events. Finally, they may allow you to understand events outside the organization that could affect the organization or you as a member of that organization. So now that we know those 5 practical reasons for studying the chapter, let's go ahead and dig in a little bit deeper. And we talked about earlier that we have 3 historical management viewpoints or approaches. And in your text you have figure 2.1 here, which is a kind of a chart breakdown of the 3 viewpoints for the historical perspective. And you can refer to this as you're reading your chapter just to kind of emphasize those points as you read about them. Just kind of give you a quick reference. So in the next section we're going to look at the classical viewpoint first, which emphasized finding ways to manage more efficiently. And as you look at your chart there, it had 2 branches. And those 2 branches are the scientific management and an administrative management, each of which is identified with particularly pioneering theorists. In general, classical management assumes that people are rational. So let's take a look at those 2 approaches. The first branch we're looking at is scientific management. Scientific management emphasizes scientific study of work methods to improve the productivity of individual workers. And 2 of its chief proponents were Frederick Taylor and the team of Frank and Lillian Gilbreths. Frederick Taylor believed that managers could eliminate soldiering deliberately working at less than full capacity by applying 4 principles of science. Those 4 principles were to evaluate a task by scientifically studying each part of that task. Next, carefully select workers with the right abilities for a specific task. Give workers the training and incentives to do the task with the proper work methods. And lastly, use scientific principles to plan out the work methods. Now, Taylor used motion studies in which he broke down each worker's job into basic physical units and then trained workers to use the best possible methods. Now, this is still used today, especially in manufacturing, where individuals such as industrial engineers or manufacturing engineers go out, look at jobs, do time studies, use ergonomic studies to help these workers do those jobs in the best possible methods. So even though this study was done a long time ago, we still apply these principles today. Taylor also suggested in his study that using a different or a differential rate system, more efficient workers are going to allow them to earn higher wages based on their efficiency. Taylor also believed that if used correctly, the principles of scientific management could enhance overall productivity. As I mentioned, the husband and wife team of industrial engineers, Frank and Lillian Gilbreths, were also chief proponents of the scientific management branch. And they kind of expanded on Taylor's motion studies. They used movie cameras to film workers at work in order to kind of isolate the parts of a job and look at those segments in applying scientific principles. So we kind of see them as, some pioneers in time and motion studies. Now we can see that scientific management is relatively concerned with the jobs of individuals, whereas our next topic, which is over administrative management, is concerned with managing the total organization. And when we look at administrative management, we talk about our pioneering theorists here, Henry Fayol and Max Weber. Now, Fayol was the first to systemize the study of management behavior. He was the first to identify that the major functions of management, such as planning, organizing, leading, and controlling. Weber believed that a bureaucracy was a rational, efficient, ideal organization based on the principles of logic. Now, when we look at the historical time of when Weber's ideas came about, his work occurred in the late 19th century. And this was then he did his work in Germany when many people were in positions of authority because of their social status, as that was how that was handled during that time and place. And his work wasn't translated into English until like around 1947. But when this information came available, it had a real impact on the influence of structuring some large corporations, such as one you've probably heard of all over the world, the Coca-Cola Company. In his studies, he found that a better performing organization should have 5 positive bureaucratic features: a well-defined hierarchy of authority, formal rules and procedures need to be in place, there needs to be a clear division of labor, and in this clear division of labor, parts of a complex job should be handled by specialists. He also talked about impersonality, without reference or connection to a particular person, and your careers in the organization are based on merit. Now, the problem with the classical viewpoint is that it just seems too mechanic. It tends to view humans as cogs within a machine rather than humans, and human needs are not given any type of importance. So obviously there's a lot more going on than just looking at a human as just a piece of machinery. So we definitely need to take in human needs, and we'll do that by bringing in behavioral theory, and that will kind of address the problem. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. The second of the 3 historical management perspectives was the behavioral viewpoint, which emphasized the importance of understanding human behavior and of motivating employees towards achievement. The behavioral viewpoint developed over 3 phases. The first phase is the early behaviorism, which was pioneered by Hugo Munsterberg, Mary Parker Follett, and Elton Mayo. The second phase, the human relations movement, was pioneered by Abraham Maslow, who proposed a hierarchy of needs, and Douglas McGregor, who proposed a Theory X and Theory Y view to explain managers' attitudes towards workers. And lastly, the third phase is the behavioral science approach, which relied on scientific research over developing theories about behavior useful to modern managers. Now, as I stated, early behaviorism had 3 pioneers. Hugo Munsterberg suggested that psychologists could contribute to industry by studying jobs, identifying the psychological conditions for employees to do their best work. Now, our second pioneer, Mary Parker Follett, thought organizations should be democratic, with employees and managers working together. And the third pioneer, Elton Mayo, hypothesized a so-called Hawthorne effect, which suggested that employees work harder if they received added attention from their managers, and if they thought that managers cared about their welfare and that supervisors paid special attention to them as their employee. In our second phase here, we talk about the human relations movement, which suggested that better human relations could increase overall worker productivity. Some of the pioneers that were involved here with human relations were Abraham Maslow, who proposed a hierarchy of human needs. And his name probably strikes some memory in you right away when you think about the famous hierarchy of human needs, where his findings talked about physiological needs, safety needs, love, esteem, and self-actualization. And we'll get more into this in another chapter. Another of our pioneers for this was Douglas McGregor, who proposed a Theory X. This is pretty much where managers just have a pessimistic view of their workers, and Theory Y, where managers have a positive view of their workers. And in here, workers are considered capable of accepting responsibility, self-direction, self-control, and overall being creative. And lastly, on our behavioral viewpoint, the last phase, behavioral science. That behavioral science approach relied on scientific research for developing theories about human behaviors that can be used to provide practical tools for manager. We talked about how behavioral science research concludes that cooperation is superior to competition in promoting achievement and productivity. Alfie Kohn notes that competition can make people hostile. We definitely do not want hostility in the workplace. Now, some of the disciplines of behavioral science will include psychology, sociology, economics, and anthropology, and you'll probably come across several of these courses as you're adding to your management toolkit through getting your degree or just wanting to take those classes to better understand behavioral science. Alright, let's take a look at this question here just to kind of tie in some of the information we've just covered. Alright, which viewpoint emphasized the scientific study of work methods to improve the productivity of individual workers? Is it A, science management, B, administrative management, C, behavioral science, or T, TQM? So go ahead and take a look at those and see which one you think's right. Alright, hopefully it didn't take you long to quickly answer that the correct answer is A, scientific management, because by definition scientific management emphasizes the scientific study of work methods in order to improve the productivity of individual workers. If you got A, great job everyone.